Hello, welcome to another episode of Tea with Molly. Today we have Joan Fletcher. She is the president of Winning Ways, Inc. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Molly. I'm looking forward to this.
I'd love to ask you a question about leadership. How critical is it for a leader to understand themselves? I want to dive into the concept of assessments because I think that we as people have a hard time sitting down long enough to self-assess, to go through the process of, self-actualization, even taking a few minutes to take a break and say, what is my vision for my life? Where am I going to go from here as a person, let alone a leader? So how critical is it to take the time to do something like a self-assessment?
I think that what you're asking is probably one of the most important things in leadership. There's so much new research, and even the last 5 years, on emotional intelligence, and those leaders that have a higher emotional intelligence are much better leaders. And the more you begin to understand what is involved with emotional intelligence, such as your intrapersonal and your interpersonal skills, you start to realize that the people who are more self-aware and the people that are continually learning more about themselves, understanding how they react a certain way, what triggers them, what doesn't trigger them, how they can self-regulate, all of those things, the feelings of empathy and compassion, all of those things make a better leader. And if you're not aware as a leader, you're not going to develop those skills.
Now, when you work with others in helping them truly do that type of assessment, are there different tools that you typically lean toward, or is it really more intuitive, a combination of both? What is that like when you say, okay, let's sit down and go through a process? What do you use?
So I use a lot of different things. Of course, it will always depend on the individual, because if some people are coming where they've already been assessed a lot and they have, notebooks full of assessment information, then probably one of the best things I can do with them is help them connect the dots in all of that information. But that's not often the case. Usually it's more a person has taken an assessment 10 years ago and then took one other one, and no one really debriefed the information with them. So they're not even fully aware of what the assessment results give them. In that case, we look at those assessments, but we also do some additional ones. I'm a real believer that assessments such as understanding your emotional IQ, your emotional intelligence, also understanding what your values are, so your core values that drive you personally and professionally, and then also understanding your behaviors. And I often do all three assessments, and it doesn't take that much time to take the assessment. What takes the time is to debrief it and understand, so this is some more information about you. Now what? And then, like you said, it's a combination of not just the assessments, then it's diving a little bit deeper and looking at, let's say someone could really benefit from being more self-aware. I don't think I've ever met anyone who couldn't benefit from being more self-aware. But then there's so many different things you can do. Everything from just raising your awareness level on a specific item each day. So maybe just becoming more aware of what gets you frustrated, or when you raise your voice, whatever it is. And if you start to notice that and jot down a few notes, by a week or two, you have a whole different view of, wow, this is what's starting to happen for me. I'm noticing that this happens whenever this certain person is in the room. Well, isn't that interesting? So now we have a whole different path to go down.
What happens when a leader is, or when anyone who you've worked with, whatever their title might be, sees an assessment or the results of an assessment and basically is just in disbelief? They just don't, it doesn't make sense to them. This is not me, this isn't working, this can't be right. How do you handle something like that? And how important is it for you to also communicate with them how assessments work, that these tools will actually exist because they are supposed to work?
Right, exactly. So I think it's really important, first and foremost, to make sure that the assessments you're using have a lot of validity, research studies behind them. Because there are some assessments out there that are fun and free and whatever you can get off the internet, and it might give you some interesting information. But if you don't know how valid the assessment is, then maybe it isn't the right information. So one of the things I like to share with my clients, the tools that I'm using are, they have validity studies done every single year in the US and in Germany. That's very important. Also that they're used by, thousands, literally thousands of companies. And that also is giving you an indicator that maybe this information is correct. The other thing I like to say, and I think it's important for all of us to realize, when you're taking an assessment, especially if it's computerized, right? If you're entering data, you're entering your answers into the computer, there's always some questions that you're not 100% sure. You might waffle. Well, if there's even as many as 2 questions that you waffled the opposite way, you could get a result on the assessment that's not truly you. So that means when you see something in an assessment that doesn't feel right, you have to really be honest with yourself and ask, does it not feel right because I don't want to be like that? Or does it not feel right because it's not true? So a good thing to do is to take it to someone, a spouse, a dear friend, a colleague at work who knows you very well, and to ask them, do you think this is accurate? And almost all the time, the person is like, oh yeah, that's absolutely you. Then you have to step back and say, okay, I don't like what it says, but what could this information do for me? How could this help me become a better person professionally and personally? And up to this time in my career, Molly, every single time I've gone through that with someone, they say, okay, I guess that's probably accurate. Now what can I do about that?
I'm just thinking about all the times that I've had to take assessments, every time that I went either on an interview or had to really decide what type of path I wanted to go in a corporate setting where they were asking me to take an assessment so they can know where to place me, where I can best excel. And I tell you, some of the questions are so tough because we, I think as human beings, have a hard time being honest with ourselves, especially if it's uncomfortable. Like, this doesn't feel right. To answer it honestly would make me a, schmuck, or would not, I just want to be a good person. I want to give the right answer. The right answer isn't always the honest answer. And I think that is also the struggle and the trick that really can change the results of these assessments. So I like your point about just pausing and saying, okay, why is this difficult for me to answer? And maybe the question is, how can I most honestly answer this, whether I like it or not?
Good way to do it, right? And I also think that, let's say a values assessment, that you find you're answering all the questions that mean you only want more money. And that might feel wrong to you. But then if you really work with someone who can interpret the data, the answers, the way they should be interpreted, almost always you find out, well, that's a really good thing about myself. So maybe I'm not so altruistic as I thought I was. Maybe I really am about always making more money. But the reason I want to make more money could be many reasons. But one reason often is I want to really take care of those people I love. I want to be able to put the money away and also donate a certain amount of money every year. And if I'm not focused on earning the money, I won't have it. So there's always a different way to look at it than the first glance.
We're here with Joan Fletcher on the set of Tea with Mali. We're going to take a quick break and be right back.
Unless you've walked in their shoes, you would never know the overwhelming feelings of sadness, anxiety, and hopelessness that cause hundreds of students to take their own lives.
The number of students we lose to suicide every year would fill an entire high school.
We need to start the conversation about good mental health.
Help us reverse attitudes and save lives.
The life that you save might be your own, or someone you love.
To learn more, go to attitudesinreverse.org.
Welcome back to Tea with Mali. We're having a fantastic conversation with Joan Fletcher. What led you to the work that you're doing now, and how did you come up with the title or the concept of your company?
So, two totally different answers.
Okay.
Yeah, two totally different answers. I think, well, I know the reason I do what I do is because it is my passion. If I can help someone learn more about themselves and lead more of the life they want to lead, if I didn't have to pay my mortgage and pay college tuitions and things like that for my kids, then I would totally do it for free, because that's the payment for me. And I've had a wonderful experience over the last 20 plus years to help a lot of different people really enrich their life and make their own life better. So that's huge. I mean, that's why I do what I do. As far as the name of the company, many years ago, a client I worked with, it was a funny little meeting. It was a meeting at a restaurant. We were eating lunch, and she said a few things to me. I am just distraught. I don't know what to do. The company's not working right. And I said, let's just take a few moments and talk about it. And as we talked about it, she got out a napkin from the restaurant. She started writing little notes on there, and she contacted me late that night. I didn't know. It was my office phone, so I didn't hear it ring. And the next morning, when I looked at my voicemail, there was a message from her, and she was a branding expert. That was her company, was branding. And she said, I cannot tell you what our lunch did for me and my company yesterday. I came back yesterday afternoon, or this afternoon, because she left it that night, and I started going through and doing many of the things that we had talked about at lunch. And it has helped me come to some very definite conclusions about what I'm going to do going forward. So I think, Joan, just my 2 cents, you should rebrand your company, and you should call it Winning Ways, because that's what you provided for me today. And I listened to that morning, and I called my CPA lawyer, and I said, hey, Glenn, this is what a client just said. I wonder if it's available. And he actually hung up the phone on me, which he's never done. And probably 10 minutes later, he called me back and he said, you own it. And I was like, you're kidding me. I wasn't 100% sure, actually. I just thought it was interesting. And I thought that was all just a really positive sign. Right. So that's...
He obviously made the decision for you because it fit.
That's what he said. He said it's great, great name.
Yeah.
So, and I have run across, most people love the name. Some people have said to me, but it's not always about winning. And it's not always about winning, but I think it's always about going after what you believe you can go after.
And that leads me into the next question, goals. Mm-hmm. We talk about winning ways, going after what you want. Well, what if you don't know what you want? What if you've not named it? What if you have not put it out there into the universe, or written it down, or put it somewhere? How critical is it to be able to visually see it, or to be able to hear it? That aspect. We talk a lot about that in the world of emotional intelligence and leadership and visionaries. But how many people actually sit down and not only do they write their goals, but commit to their goals?
Very few people. It's really interesting. I had the opportunity to speak with a great group of women last May. And so this is about 5.5 months ago. And as I was sharing with them, what I share whenever I talk about goal setting or I work with a client on goal setting was the power of actually setting aside some space on your calendar to sit down, identify one goal that you really want to accomplish. It's going to be a bit of a stretch, but you really want it. And then writing it down. And then I have a 10-step process that you walk through, and then you are guaranteed to achieve your goal. And when I went through this, these women were so wound up, so excited about it. Many of them talked to me afterwards, after I spoke. Many of them communicated with me on email. One woman in particular, I'll just use her as an example because there were several like her. She had this goal, she quickly identified it, she knew what she wanted to do, and she said, based on kids out of school this summer and everything, I'm going to shelve it until September when they go back to school. But then I'm going to follow through on it. So I contacted her early September just to help, and I said, how's it going? Have you picked it back up? I will pick it back up. I'm going to take time for this and write it down. And as far as I know at this moment, she isn't doing it. So that's what I find. Even if you're told you can achieve it 100% of the time, even if you're told there's this simple step-by-step process, not everyone's going to do it. But the people who do it are definitely the people I love to work with in my company, because the sky's the limit. I mean, I've watched people become millionaires. People find the mate that they've been wanting to meet all their life and marrying that person and having children and being very happy. It can be a personal or a professional goal. We're just this one being. We're not two different selves. You know, we don't have our work self and our personal self. And so whatever the goal is, if that's really important to you, it's going to change your life if you actually identify it, write it down, make a plan for achieving it, and achieve it. I mean, why not?
What's the difference between someone who actually achieves their goals and who doesn't? What's the trend in your mind, from your experience, the people you work with? What is stopping those that aren't committing to their goals? Why do we not commit? And why do we, if we want it so bad that we've been able to formulate it, how come it's not a push internally for us to achieve it?
It's such a great question. I mean, I have thought about that question a lot, and I have really done my best to notice differences. And one of the things, I think it goes back to what we first started talking about, is self-awareness. I think that if you're not as self-aware as you could be, then we have a tendency to make a list and to focus all our time and energy on the to-do list. And we're very busy. We're busy every day. There's not enough hours in the day. We work so very hard. We get to December, the end of the year, and we're like, wow, I'm really in the same place I was last year. But I don't understand. I was so busy. I worked so hard. I did everything on my list. I think the people who are more self-aware, it's not about the list. It's about their goals. So they start at a different place in January or whatever month. They start in the place of, what is the high-level picture for me? What one thing could I focus on that would really change my life, that would improve it? It would improve my personal life, improve my professional life, whatever it is. Those people with that amount of self-awareness, they then set that as a goal. And now their to-do lists every day are totally different, because their lists are focused on accomplishing that goal. So they get to the end of the year, and it's a totally different moment. It's a totally different moment for them. And they get to the end of the year, and yes, they've been busy. Maybe they don't have enough hours in the day either, but they have accomplished 1 or 2 or 3 goals that they had not done the year before. And one of the things for myself, I've played around with different things that would work, but one of the things for myself is I always identify a word for the year. And it takes me a lot of time to do it. I start right around now, usually October, November, and I try to figure out, what is that goal? What is something that could really enhance my life and get me more on the right track, whatever. And then I come up with a word. And I use that word that next year for as many things as I can. I mean, my passwords, my focus each day, my activities, what I'm drawn to.
What's your 2014 word?
So my 2014 word is a fascinating word. It's a simple word and it has a lot of meaning. My 2014 word is invest. And I had an excellent year last year. Last year was my best year in business ever in my life. Yes. How about that? Great. It was phenomenal. And it was because of the goals that I set and what I focused on. But the invest word didn't come from money necessarily. The invest word was, I wanted to invest in me. I wanted to work on several parts of me that I had not been focusing on. My youngest just went away to college, so I'm an empty nester. And that was a really big step for me. And I knew that was going to happen. And so I wanted that year of almost 8 months while he was still at home to really invest in me as a mom and of all those things that I wanted to do in those last months of having a child in my house. And then I also wanted to invest in me preparing for when I would be there alone, and all the things that that was going to mean to me personally and professionally. And I was thinking about this just a couple weeks ago. I was talking about it with a very close friend, and I was saying, this is fascinating because I have invested in me in so many different ways than I've ever done it before. And so that's what I'm still working on till the end of this year.
What I'm hearing from you is lead thyself, invest in you. There's a phrase that I used to defy because it didn't like what I thought it meant, being self-centered. And then as I got older and more experienced and learned a lot of life lessons along the way, I realized how important it was to center self. And I understood what self-centeredness really is. It's being able to focus on me first, making sure that I'm healthy, making sure that I'm able to sustain my living, that I can have an abundance and an overflow in order to give more with meaning, with passion, and not give with scarcity, because you can't really truly give what you don't have. And what I heard you say was the word invest, and investing in yourself at a deeper level than just money, because money is important. We have to survive. We have to live in this world. So it's not a knock against money, but money typically comes because we have then held on to our worth and our value, and that leads the way. And so you have this amazing philosophy or a belief system of leading thyself and how critical that is. So can you share that in terms of leadership and how that has been your mantra for the work that you do?
I have to say that if my associates and clients that hear this interview or see this interview, they have to know that you were not set up to ask me that question. Because one of the main programs that I do, one of the main programs, seminars, is called Lead Yourself First. And I'm a real believer that in order to be a very impactful leader, a leader that others want to follow, they will only follow you if you're someone worth following. So the first and foremost thing we have to do every single day is to work on ourselves. The more we are self-centered, the more we work on ourselves and find whatever that center is, the more other people are going to want to follow us. And for some reason, we seem to be a lot of people in this country that are not taking the pause, taking the time, whether it's meditation daily, exercise, taking time to make the right food, taking time to spend time with those people that restore us and help us laugh and smile. And all of those things are so important to being an amazing leader. And it's interesting, the leaders that we know are so well respected and loved. You hear all kinds of things about them, that they take excellent care of themselves, they care for their families, they care for their employees. That's all part of leading yourself first.
I think you do an excellent job with this. We have known each other for a long time. I just realized the other day when you sent me your bio and I said, when did we meet? And oh my gosh, over 7 years ago.
Oh,
definitely, right?
Definitely, yeah, over 10 years ago, I think.
Oh gosh. We're dating ourselves here. What I have learned through the years in following what you're doing is that you are so good, and maybe it's just a perception, you have to tell us the truth of what's really going on here, but
that's fair.
You're so good about having the exercise and the balance and being able to say, okay, it's time for me. I need to go and do what I love. And you know, I see your social media feeds and you're hiking and you're taking care of your soul. And when you say leaders lead thyself, and you say that the leaders that we love and respect and admire are doing the things that we aspire to do, what are some of the routines, some of the things that allow you to pause and say, okay, when am I off kiltered here?
I really think that, well, I know years ago I was definitely not in good shape. I was in some personal situations that were not the best. But I kept being told, exercise is good for you. Take quiet time, it's good for you. And I would go to certification programs and learn how to help clients do this. And I thought, I have to do this. I remember hearing Brian Tracy speak, and he said, invest in your business and you'll make a living. Invest in yourself and you'll make a fortune. And I remember driving back from that, literally,
It's really powerful.
in my car, saying, if I ever want to do well in my business, I have to first do well with myself. And that day, I thought, like everything else I do, I believe in taking simple, small steps always. Those are the steps. I do believe in the tortoise and the hare. Right. And I see it happen all the time. We don't have to do amazing things. I started reading more books from Brian Tracy and quotes and things like that. And he had the quote that if you would improve yourself 0.1% every day, you would become the most successful person in the world. It was his guarantee. And I put all these things together and I thought, okay, I have little kids. I don't have time to train for a marathon. I don't have the interest in it. I don't have time to eat everything that's right or make everything that's right food. But surely I have time for 10 minutes of exercise every day. So some days, literally, right before I would go to bed, I would walk down to the end of my street and walk back. But I would get my 10 minutes in. And it's like anything else. You start to make a little change and it compels you to start to reason, well, I could probably do 15. And of course that walking by myself was also a pause, time alone, and in my head. And that went from doing that to very soon after that, hiring a personal trainer 2 times a week, very inexpensive because I didn't justify much money on it. And I started lifting weights. And I think a lot of us as women, we see that as something that, why would we do that? But what I quickly learned was that strength training was strength training for even my mind. And I started fairly quickly to notice results. And then that led to biking and so many other things that I love. Now it's such a part of my life that if I don't have at least 4 days a week where I have a lot of activity, I miss it in all kinds of ways.
It's like you're inspiring yourself to be your better self because you take this one little step and then you've accomplished it and then you're like, well, I'm going to push myself a little further because this is a success now. And when you are constantly seeking success, whatever it looks like to you, or feeling good, I think that's a way for you to kind of move to the next level. 10 minutes becomes 20, 20 becomes 30. And you mentioned earlier one goal. And I think that that's really key because what happens when you are running a business and you have a family and you have to be, the wife sometimes, the mother, the best friend, the sister, the boss, whatever. And you have tons of goals and you have tons of areas in your life that you have different, many purposes ultimately make up your life. How do you manage unless you take one thing at a time? And that's hard. That's very hard. Even I struggle with that today. It's like I have all these things that I want to do, but how do you justify one when you have 50 waiting for you? And I think it is giving yourself that permission to say, if I at least accomplish one, at least I've accomplished something, instead of trying to do 50 and accomplishing nothing.
Exactly. And it is really powerful. I mean, how many of us right now can say that I wrote down a goal and I accomplished it? Most of us are saying what you're saying. There's so many things I have to get done and I have to get them done now. And you're not accomplishing them. So getting one accomplished is a huge gift to yourself. And they really add up. For me, I can tell you, and I'm sure, I hope many of my clients would tell you the same thing. You start working on the one thing, you accomplish it, it leads you to the next thing. You accomplish it, it leads you to the next thing. it's like wildfire. It's great.
And it's amazing the credibility that you implant into your clients' minds and then also potential clients because of word of mouth when you're actually practicing what you're preaching.
You know, in the beginning, when I started exercising, I sat with the personal trainer. I had a 4 o'clock on Tuesdays, and then I worked out with him on Saturday morning. That 4 o'clock on Tuesday, I was tested in every way imaginable by offers to speak, client programs, seminars, my son's viola lessons. I was constantly tested to move that date. And I had made, that was my goal for the year, to not let anything be more important than myself for 2 half-hour time periods. And I found that it was almost impossible, but it wasn't impossible. And I don't think I ever lost business, even though I said, I have a meeting at 4 on Tuesday, so I could come before or I could come after. But I can't move this meeting. I never said, this is my workout time with my personal trainer. But that didn't need to be said. What needed to be said was that I was honoring 1 hour a week for me. 1 hour. And many of us can't honor that.
Yeah, we have a tendency to move it around. Well, I can be flexible, and they can't.
That's exactly right. We do. And I do that all the time, but not with my workout. And that's been one step, but then it leads to other things, right? Then you start to honor even more things about yourself.
Are there parallel tracks of being a mother and being a leader? I'm very curious because I don't think I've ever asked that question. But as we were talking about you having to take care of your children, now the last one is off to college and you're in this new space in your life, I think about that in terms of having your business be a baby and, you know, having to nurture it, having to water it, and having to think about the future and preparing it for life, preparing it for maybe your exit strategy, right, when you're not here anymore. So I'd love to hear your take on that. I'm not.
That's fascinating.
Yeah,
I've never been asked
me,
that.
and I was like, what are some of the parallels? I'm not a mother yet, so I am definitely curious to know, how do you treat emotionally, you know, your children and this entity that has the energy of your child?
Right. You know, the things that are going through my mind right now that I've never looked at that way. When my first child started to learn to drive, one of the things as parents we really preach to them: no talking on the cell phone, no drinking at all, not even one glass of anything can you get behind the wheel. And I remember when that started years ago, and I thought, oh my, that means they can't ever see me talking on the cell phone when I'm driving, nor could I ever come home to them in the evening after a networking event and have had a glass of wine or something to drink. So it started to change my behavior. And I would say, I think my children would say that they haven't seen me come home after having a glass of wine. I changed behavior. I switched to only water, and unless someone else was driving. And I'm usually the one that's driving. So it had to change a lot of things. And my youngest, I can remember several times where he would say to me, as we're going to meet friends for dinner, he would say, guess what? You can have a glass of wine because I'll drive home. And I thought, that is about leadership, right? How can you expect your team to willingly jump into something if you're not willing to jump in there also? And I see this in some of the exceptional leaders I have the opportunity to work with. They will just roll up their sleeves and dive in. They'll stand at the photocopier and make copies, and they're the vice president or president of a big company. They don't care. The point is to get the project done, all hands on deck, everyone does something. It's not a level that no longer are you supposed to be making photocopies. It's about working together and getting it done. So that's a fascinating question. I'm going to be thinking about that for a while now.
Well, send us your notes and I'll share that with our
Okay,
audience
great.
because I mean, you did make a great example there. So as you're coaching and working with all these unique individuals and they're so dynamic and they have their own package of stuff, I'm sure it's not, one size fits all. So how do you manage that? Because you're one package, you have your own set of, frame of reference and experiences. How do you manage so many different personalities?
I think it's probably some of what you have a lot of, Molly, and that is I take each individual as they are. And I'm so fascinated with every client I work with as far as what's making them tick, what could help set them up to succeed more often. What could we work on, or what could I suggest for them to do to become more self-aware and to figure out what the main challenge is? What's the main obstacle? What would their life look like if they got beyond that obstacle? And then, without even focusing on it or realizing it, it's individualized, it's personalized for that person. Same with teams. Just recently I worked with a large team, and the president of the organization met with me and said, this is what needs to be done. And I said, okay, what do you want as an outcome? And he explained what he wanted as an outcome. And I said, now before I draft a proposal or start to work with them, I would like to meet with a couple people on the team. And it would be interesting to see if they come up with the need as the same outcome as you. And when I met with the team leader, she started talking in depth about the challenges and the obstacles they were having as a team and the other things they've tried that they haven't been able to do. And by the end of that conversation, the president was looking at me and he said, I guess we're going to do this a little differently then, because we're going to try to accomplish their outcomes. And that's the power of it. So then I make the program to go towards those outcomes. And then when people say, this was wonderful, this was exactly what we needed, well, of course, because they designed it. They figured out what they wanted.
There was their ownership was there. Yeah, the piece that they actually got a chance to develop and create this themselves makes a big difference. You brought up a great point earlier. I want to take us back, and you said meeting people where they are. I think that's the work that we do, being able to meet people where they are. I'd love for you to share your insights. How do you do it without meeting someone and having preconceived notions or judgments? Or how do we check that? Because at the end of the day, no matter how many people we've coached, no matter how skilled we are as a coach, consultant, mentor, we're still a human being. So how do we meet someone? And then how do we ask a leader to meet their employees or to meet their colleagues where they are? What mental exercise has to happen to really just leave behind any preconceived notions and judgments and say, okay, I'm going to start with a clean slate and I'm not going to make any assumptions. Go.
Right.
How do we do that?
Right. One of the things I believe in is if I'm going to do coaching and if I'm going to do training as my profession, then I need to go to as many trainings as I can professionally and personally and learn from other professionals. I need to pay for that. And I need to pay for coaches. So for the last 15 years, I have paid a lot of money for a coach to work with me every other year. And it's always been worthwhile. The very first coach I ever hired was an ex-lawyer. In his previous life, he had been a lawyer. And he said that he grew up with a bunch of guys, always riding their bikes around town. And one of their favorite things to do was to sit at the little town center fountain and to rate every girl that walked by on a scale of 1 to 10. And he said that they got very good at this. And what he found out when he became a lawyer, well, he wasn't self-aware enough, but when he was a lawyer, he said this continued, but it went into labeling men also. And he said that when he first started to realize he wanted to make a bigger impact and he started getting trained in coaching, he realized that this was really a fatal flaw, because any person that he met, anywhere, even a child, he rated them a number. And he realized that through his coaching, he had to change that. And he came up with this way to do it. So he decided that from that moment on, he was going to see every single person that he met with a little yellow Post-it sticky note on their forehead with the number 10. And he said he started working on this, and it was fascinating because over time, he didn't have to really visually see the yellow Post-it. He just started approaching people and connecting with people exactly where they were, and that was great. And I love that story. It made such an impact on me that I think I've always had a lot of empathy and compassion. That's one of my emotional areas that I have high. I'm, just the way I was. But that raised it a lot, because there are some times we meet someone that maybe we overheard them yelling at someone in line, or some behavior we don't like, that we start to rate them very low. And I continually go back to every single person's a 10. And yes, your rating could go down if after we meet you're really crazy or whatever. But for the most part, that has really improved my way of connecting with each person.
And I think it also, to your credit, being someone who naturally is empathetic and compassionate makes it easier to also see and imagine the 10.
Oh, I'm sure it does.
I don't think that it's natural for everyone, because I've met people, and again, just how they're built. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just how they process. Like, I trust completely until my trust is broken. Others don't trust at all until you prove yourself, and that's
Exactly.
fine. We're just different how we're built. But I can imagine that, again, I hope some of the leaders that are watching are thinking about this. How are you built? And if you're not high on empathy and compassion, like, how are you coming across when you meet someone, and how fair is that, At the same time, if we're so empathetic and compassionate, how naive might we be if we don't, again, listen to our intuition? Because I've had that happen as well. So,
right.
we just
So
built
you
differently.
probably, with all of your empathy and compassion, you might be more like I am, where almost everyone's a 10. And we're concerned about ever lowering it. Right. So we almost need the opposite exercise, where we meet them as a 10, but then if actions and behaviors are showing that they're not a 10, we have to also pay attention to that. We have to be aware. It's that raising that self-awareness. I know and
not giving other people excuses for bad behavior, because, well, they probably have so much going on.
Right. And to protect ourselves. For this coach I worked with, who had been the lawyer, this was an extremely hard thing for him. He talked about the years he had to keep practicing it, or else he would just lapse back into, oh, she's a 3, she's a 7, he's a 6. And he said that he's really had to work hard on it. But you're right. I think that people such as you and I, we have to be very careful of people that will take advantage of us, take advantage of the situation.
And there's a fine line. I think that everyone has to understand kind of that balance between, trusting too much and not trusting enough. And we just have to, again, going back to know ourselves. We have to know our strengths. We have to know when those strengths make sense. We have to know our areas of weakness and how that might, basically impact the way that we're in a situation, and we might react because, again, if I'm completely fall in love with people the first time I meet them, and it could be a maniac who's ready to kill me. I mean, you have to allow your intuition, you have to listen to that inner self that says, maybe not time for compassion, empathy right now, run.
Exactly.
Like that, but it is.
Regardless what I'm feeling about this person, I have to be self-aware that this is probably not a good person to go into business with, to do a joint venture with, to do a project with.
And then, well, you brought it up, project. So you have something that's coming up. It's a retreat for professional women.
Yes.
So before you give details about it, do you specifically focus on women and that's why this is coming up, or is that an area that you want to really highlight? Because I do want people to know that they can work with you depending on who you love to work with and if it's the right demographic for you.
Thank you, Molly, for bringing it up. I don't just work with women, but what has happened, I've been very involved with CREW the last couple years, which is commercial real estate women, and I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of amazing women that are really working on their leadership, working on just their whole selves. And there's been this reoccurring theme that's been so loud, and that is, I'll work with a coach once my life's not so hectic. I will slow down and pause once my life's not so hectic. I will take time for myself. I'll care for myself better later. And it's so sad for me to see this happening. And I thought, I have never done a retreat before.
Oh, really?
But I thought this might attract some of those women that are so busy and they're not taking any time for themselves, that maybe they could justify just taking 2 nights, just one weekend. And in that weekend, putting a lot of quiet time and a lot of pauses, so they can start to tune in and listen to what they could do right now today to make their life more valuable to them and to the people who love them.
Right. I giggled earlier because those are the same exact excuses I get when we're talking and starting to think about how I can support them, right? Whether it's the one-on-one, coaching, or whether it's coming to a retreat. It's always, I want to do it. Like I love the idea of investing in me, but I'll do it later.
I'll do it later. This isn't the right time.
I want to invest in other people first, and then I'll come back when I'm ready.
I just am too busy.
Right.
So I couldn't justify this.
That made me giggle because I'm like, okay, so it's definitely a theme, right? And I think it's also not that it's a woman thing, but I think especially in the DC market, there's so much going on in one given day and the roles that we play here that makes it very difficult to give ourselves permission to invest in ourselves. Secondly, if you need any support and want any words of advice or wisdom on retreats, let me know. I've been hosting retreats for years now.
You've been doing them forever.
Wonderful.
You've been doing them
forever.
forever.
That you're doing this, because I really do believe it takes away the pressure from having to play any specific role, and they just get to be a human being who's coming for an opportunity to explore. There's no major expectations, just explore, come up with ideas, give them the freedom to learn about themselves again while they're learning about other people. So wish you the best of luck on that.
Thank you.
What are your immediate or ultimate goals for this retreat? Like what would make you feel so uplifted and this has been a success?
Well, it would be a couple things. One of the things that I'm looking at is that there's only spots for 10 women. So I'm hoping that those 10 women are not going to know each other at all. So if I look at, I have it half filled and they don't know each other. And I think that that's going to be very powerful. I'm hoping that they'll connect with one another and start to become more aware of how similar they are, in the sense that they're doing amazing things professionally, but personally, they're not taking the time and investing on themselves personally. And the power of what can happen if you do invest in yourself personally, your career will go further. And if that aha even comes out a little bit for each person there, I will feel like I'll feel wonderful. I'll feel wonderful about that.
That's great. Where is it going to be?
It's going to be at Rehoboth Beach.
Okay. And time frame?
The last weekend of October. Okay. So, and the first part of November. So it's that 31st through 2nd. Okay.
And will you be doing this again in the future, or this is kind of a pilot?
This is rather a pilot, although I've already had at least 10 different people say the weekend didn't work for them and they'd like to sign up for the next one. But we'll see. I mean, you're doing retreats. I have to figure out if how this works with a location like that, how it works financially for all involved. I was at an event, and one woman said, "I want to go so badly, but the price point is too high." And another woman came up to her and said, "Are you kidding me? Do you know what men in executive positions spend on all of their long 4-day, 5-day golf outings? And it's golfing. This price point is nothing compared to what you need to do for yourself to invest in yourself." And I thought, wasn't that interesting that two women, both in very high leadership positions, they know each other, they respect each other, they had two totally different views. Absolutely. And you can imagine who signed up, right? The woman who saw that it was time to invest in herself because she wanted to do more of that.
It really comes down to whether or not they are really ready to take this leap of faith on themselves and believe that it's worth it. The value is very interesting with pricing because, again,
it's so hard to figure out.
I have been doing retreats for a long time, and there was times when we had to change it a few times, and at the end of the day you have to release it and say, you know what, the people that are going to be attracted to this, who find value in this, will show up. And those that don't are just not ready. It's not a no, it's just a maybe or maybe later, or just not the right demographic of people. So
thank you. I agree with you.
Absolutely welcome. Well, we're coming to the close of the interview, and I'd like for you to share any final thoughts, whether it's specifically focused on the professional women leaders or just in general with leaders. Any words you'd like to share around what it takes to win in life, what it takes to reach those goals, and to remind people how important it is to take action on what you want.
Okay, so I think if I'm just going to say one thing, I love metaphors. So one of the metaphors I always like to think of and use is that of a sailboat. You know, we see that beautiful sailboat going across the water. Hopefully we've had many days this summer to see that and to notice that. And you just think it's all put together. The reality is, the only way that sailboat is working is how strong and put together it is underneath the surface of the water. And I believe that especially in the DC metro area, we are all so good at putting out this amazing facade. We are masters at it. What will benefit each of us is the more we work on what's behind that facade, what's underneath the surface of the water. And that can be anything from therapy, coaching, exercise, eating right, making time for yourself, professional reading, professional development, personal development, any of those things. Maybe it's spiritual. Whatever it is, maybe it's 20 minutes of meditation a day, but not all of it. Pick one thing that you're not doing today, and start a simple practice. And you are just building the strength of what is under the water on your personal sailboat. And that's what I...
It's a beautiful metaphor. Thank you. Thank you for ending with that. That's perfect. It's a perfect ending. So tell us, how do we find you? Where can people connect with you?
Okay, so you can find me a couple different ways. You can just go to the winningwaysinc.com website. Make sure you get the Inc., or there is a Winning Ways company that's a gambling company, so you might not want to go that direction. But winningwaysinc.com, they'll take you to the website, and then you can email from there. Or you can look up our offices on the website and call me directly. And I'm always interested in talking with and meeting with anyone, free of charge, just to hear your story and to find out if this is the right step for us to work together. And if it's not, many times I have a suggestion, ideas of what might be another step for you that would be a better step, whatever. But it's always worth to meet and talk.
That's great. Thank you so much, Joan, for being here.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure
Molly.
to have you.
So nice.
Thanks
Wonderful.
again. Thank you. Thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of Tea with Mully, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Unless you've walked in their shoes, you would never know the overwhelming feelings of sadness, anxiety, and hopelessness that cause hundreds of students to take their own lives.
The number of students we lose to suicide every year would fill an entire high school.
We need to start the conversation about good mental health.
Help us reverse attitudes and save lives.
The life that you save might be your own or someone you love.
To learn more, go to attitudesinreverse.org.